Hi everyone, and welcome to our final video on tessellations. In the past, we've talked about simple regions and intricate regions, but in this video, we're going to be talking about regions of multiple shapes. So in this video, for example, we have a pattern that you can see all around us that has multiple shapes involved, including ones like octagons, which would not normally tessellate. So the way we've made these octagons tessellate is by building other shapes around it that will fill in those gaps that octagons would normally have, right? There's two ways to see tessellations of patterns, of regions with multiple patterns. You could see it like bathroom tiles, where we put patterns onto the tiles, and when we click them together, those patterns meet and they create beautiful images, even though the regions themselves are still simple squares, right? Or you could see it as clumps of related shapes that happen to click together perfectly with no overlaps and no gaps, right? We're going to use both of those strategies today to explore how to create a beautiful pattern such as this one. Now, one of the important things is in the past, we kind of just assumed that region meant shape, right? We worked with one shape in both the previous videos, but it doesn't have to. Regions can include multiple shapes. They can even include parts of shapes, right? The region's outer borders can still be a simple shape, but built up of other things. So with our first strategy, we're going to do something like making the United States of America. We're going to put together one big region out of a lot of smaller regions, and then we're going to make those regions click together real nice, okay? So to start this method off, we're going to find one shape that repeats a bunch. And to me, I'm going to start with the shape that I know is going to have some gaps to fill in, which is the octagon, right? So I'm going to outline an octagon, and then I'm also going to outline two other octagons related to it, right, that are near it. So I'm going to use a slightly different color for those just so we can tell why am I doing it with some other ones nearby, right? Well, if I was making this pattern myself, for example, for the project, right, I would want to make sure that my pattern does not overlap, right? It doesn't have any overlaps, nor does it have any gaps. Right now I can see a bunch of gaps and overlaps, or sorry, a bunch of gaps, right? So I'm going to start filling in those gaps by adding in bunches of shapes that I know I can add in with no gap, no overlap still, right? So notice when I go one more ring outwards, I can add multiple shapes at once, right? See that? I added all those hexagons and those closer trapezoids, and I can see I still don't have any overlaps as a result, right? In fact, I still have some big gaps to fill. And now I think I also want to include a fourth one because I can see I need to be able to double check against the right half of the bottom left and the bottom half of the top right. So I'm going to add this pink region as well, just to be able to check everything against everything, right? So look at all the gaps I still have remaining. I see some pretty big gaps, right? And the trick is I need to figure out where to add these shapes to be able to fill the gap. So for example, if I tried to these shapes in the middle right here, you see these? They want to be taken by either green or orange. So I need to pick which one's going to get it, green or orange. And I'm going to show a lot of favoritism towards green right now because green was our first one, right? So I'm going to add 2 to green that could have been given to one of the other ones, either orange or yellow, you see? And this big octagon in the middle, all 4 of them could take that one, right? I could give that to any of the 4, but I'm going to give that to green as well. Green's going to take that. Now, since I've given those regions to green, remember, these are congruent regions. So I need to give the same regions to all my other regions in order to fill them in. And you'll notice as I fill these in, right, they click together. And I've guaranteed they'll click together by making sure that I didn't have any of them arguing over certain shapes. See? Nice and convenient. So now this region all together, allow me to highlight the region so you can really see it, right? I'm going to get rid of my pink down there and just show you the whole finished region at once. So the whole finished region will click together with perfect, no overlaps, no gaps. And I can kind of see if I repeated this, right, it would still keep tessellating. So that's one way to make a tessellation. Start with a shape, put some other copies near it, and add to the shape to make sure that they don't click together in a bad way, right? Notice with this one, I was just doing translations. If I was making my tessellation using, say, rotations, right, that would be a very different story. I would have to add them to rotated sides instead of the same sides, right? Now, also notice there's another way we could have done this, right? When I said earlier that they were arguing over some of these shapes, they both could have had a claim. What if I had divided it evenly, right? What if I had said, oh, green will get half of that and a quarter of that, and a half of this, right? So it gets half of those things. Orange is going to get also a half and a quarter, right? Because there were 4 things arguing over the octagon and 2 things arguing over those squares and trapezoids. And then yellow is going to get likewise half and a quarter. Well, notice when I give half and a quarter on the right and the bottom, everything gets it on the bottom and the right. Yeah. So orange is also going to get the right bit. And I gave the top to yellow, so orange is also going to get the top. And likewise, green's going to get the top bit. All of them have to be congruent. So when I give one region it, everything gets it. And notice my partial pieces add together to look a lot like a square, right? They look a lot like a square. Remember earlier, we said one method we could do is to find like a tile that seems to be repeating with a pattern on it that doesn't need complete shapes, right? I can have partial shapes on my square tile, and those will click together, as we can see on the left, right? But we could have also started backwards. Instead of starting by building out of one shape and adding to the region, either partial shapes or complete shapes, we could have started with a square tile and then use that square repeating tile to find a pattern. So let's say, for example, right, I just wanted to start with a blank square tile. How would I build with that square tile an intricate pattern of shapes? And the way I would do it is, I would say, okay, I want an octagon here, right? I want to add an octagon here. So I need to do the same thing. This octagonal piece I added there, I need to add it to all my other sides in order to build an octagon. Why is that? Because these other sides, right? I'll highlight those with colors. Red, let's use some slightly different colors so it's not super confusing, right? Here's a dark green down there, and here's a, well, we already got blue in the octagons, right? So I got to use a slightly different color. Maybe use an indigo here, right? See these 3 colors? This top left piece goes there. The bottom right piece from the red goes here, and the top right piece from that foresty green goes there. So I've basically cut it out from the other 3 corners to put it over there, right? That's what inciting that little pieces of the partial octagon does. So I could have seen this either as one, literally cutting it out, changing my border, right? So I'll show you a version of that below using pink, where I literally cut it out to not include those bits, right? If I'd literally cut it out to not include those bits, I would have been able to include the whole octagon over here, right? And that could have been a possible shape. And then I would just keep repeating that for all my partial shapes to be able to add on to it. Or I don't need to actually work outwards, I could work inwards, right? If I do it on one side, I just repeat it on the others to make sure that it continues to be a pattern. So I'm going to keep doing the same thing, right? I would want to go, okay, I'm going to add some pieces right here, right? And if I add those pieces, they're going to get mirrored over here, right? Because I have to do the same thing when translating, because it's going to translate down. If I add pieces over here in my pattern of shapes, they need to go over here such that they would translate and meet, right? When they meet by translating. And likewise, if I add an octagon in the middle, well, to make this hexagonal piece, right? I know that all the other hexagons need to be added too so that they would repeat in a pleasing pattern, right? So I could have just started with my square tile and cut pieces away from it to add on to other sides, right? For example, saying, oh, well, I want to get rid of this so I can add it over here. Or I could just mark the things I would get rid of to be able to duplicate that pattern to add it to the side, right? So I can just inscribe essentially the pattern on the tile. Multiple methods here of being able to make a tile pattern, right? So for example, if I was just to start from scratch, right? If I was to start from scratch, I could have just made it with the patterns here, or I could have built a region out of shapes and just checked to see they'll click together. The method that the project I would recommend for that would be to start with like a square piece of paper and use that, I would call it like nibbling method, right? Where we're nibbling away at the border, right? So you can see it again. If I was to start with my square tile, right, I want to nibble away at this border, eat away, eat away, eat away, and do the same thing repeated for all of them, right? Making sure it's really symmetrical, remembering what we learned, right? And that would gradually build a nice pattern. Yeah. I could even make different patterns, right? So for example, I could have said I want to get rid of some triangular pieces, right? And that would allow me to add a full diamond instead of an octagon if I wanted. And I could have said I want to get a big spike over here, right? And then if I make that big spike for every single one, now I have this nice pattern, and I know that'll work because I'm adding it to the other sides to click together, right? Lots of different ways to make these intricate pattern tessellations. Okay, I hope that makes some sense. If you have any questions on this video, if you need any more assistance with how to make pattern tessellations, please ask away either on email or Canvas. I'm happy to help. And hopefully these multiple methods really help you put together some awesome tessellations for our project. Look forward to seeing them, and have a great day.